computer?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You'll leave my back.
That we need to be
I
sent.
can email it to you.
Yes, all right.
We pulled a bunch of just old diagrams and utility lines and some of these various plans and things that happen over from one drive. I can email you the link.
Email me the link, and then if we need it, we'll.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
All right, we are at 10 bells, so I'd like to go ahead and call us to order. Our roll call consists of the three of us. So I see Aaron Halsey, Todd Corbin, and myself, so we've established a quorum, therefore I'll call us to order in this special meeting in unusual times. So we have a couple of different purposes today. Among them, the agenda items that will have been published relative to advanced planning on behalf of the school district. We will take all those up, and many of our guests that we have here today, and we'll recognize in just a moment, are part of that. And also, we're in the middle still of a global pandemic, and so we will take up our planning that has changed as of minutes ago even, and so we'll spend some time doing that as well. Okay, we're at about as many folks as we can have in the room. And so I'm going to fairly strictly enforce that. So we need to we'll say, thank you, you're good. Would you mind grabbing the door for us? That'd be super. And then Mike, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Franz, any other guests, let's make sure that they can access this electronically, but we're about where we should be. Sound good? Okay. Well, let me take some time to recognize our guests. I know this is a little wonky for those who are viewing online, but if you are a guest at the meeting, in other words, if you're a board member or a member of our esteemed faculty or staff, would you just introduce yourselves? We'd love to know who you are, and it's especially important since we can only see half your face. Hit it.
Okay, this is my whole face. I'm Jeff Wakener with LSU TV Architecture. And the three of us are with LSU TV within the architecture for I'm Randy Brooks with LSU TV.
I'm Angie Clarkson. I'm an interior designer also with LWPB and School Planner.
I'm Ron Fisher with Stephen H. McDonald and Associates, and I look better with half a mask. So believe my own.
I'm Kate Kubik, parent of a kindergartner.
Jody Smith, parent of the kindergarten as well.
Isn't Keeper? I have a 7th grader. Shannon Goodwin, I'm a 5th grader and a 7th grader.
Sheila Manzelli, I have 2 8th graders and a 7th grader.
Super. Well, thank you all for coming, and we'll be about the business fairly quickly. Let's follow the protocol since we do have our distancing. If you're, especially if you're going to talk for a while, let's pull it down just for the purposes of talking and then pop it back up, shall we? So we agreed last time that given that we sit in these hallowed halls of education, where not only our students, but we as adults ought to keep learning through our lives, we said we're going to do just a tiny little bit of learning each time, reach back into those things, historical, noteworthy, and worthy of our reflection, and make sure that we're learning too, even as we have our students. And so I thought it appropriate. Edgar A. Guest was a British-born American poet in the first part of the 20th century. He wrote a lot. He became sort of a people's poet in the 1920s and 30s. There's a line from this quick little poem that I think will be familiar to you. I bring it up because if we need anything right now, it, I think, is grit. And so, from Edgar A. Guest, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems uphill, when the funds are low, the debts are high, when you want to smile, you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but do not quit. Often the struggler has given up when he might have captured the victor's cup. When he learned too late, the night came down, how close he was to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out. You can never tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems far, so stick to the fight when your hardest hit. When it seems things are worse, you must not quit. This is getting old, right? The whole thing is getting old. So my encouragement to us, again, out of literature for our moment of learning today is do not quit. Let's make sure that we're encouraging ourselves in that respect and our students and our precious faculty and staff in this respect. Okay, with that, let's get to business. This will be item 3 on our agenda, having recognized our guests. Here we'll get into the meat of it. We have undoubtedly had a few revisions to our reopening plan. As we promised even last week, this is going to be dynamic because the circumstances under which we're working are changing, and we have had even, again, as of yesterday evening, some significant policy changes from Edmond Public Schools, whom we don't follow to the letter, but who obviously has an outsized influence in our choices. So with that, Dr. Pierce, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's have you walk us through agenda items 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we'll just work our way through those.
We'll start with agenda item 3, which is to look at revisions and modifications to our reopening plan. And if you want to, board members, you have it on attached as an attachment on your Chromebook or maybe your hard copy as well. You can, everyone else can follow along here on the screen. Thank you, Mr. President. We also realize that it is very dynamic and very fluid. And as I said, even as last evening, things kind of changed. This is like a huge Rubik's Cube, and someone just sometimes just moves one square and it changes all the look of a lot of things. So we have been living with this and working with this, and want to propose a few changes. This is the original slideshow that we already had, the slide deck, and we, I'm just going to go through and show the highlights of all the edits. The things that haven't changed, like this slide, I'm just going to click through because you've already seen it and so forth. That's our letter to the families. The next slide about considerations, the only change to this is I added a few words about being flexible and adaptable, like Mr. Lofrich just introduced, that we have to be fluid. We have to look at the context of certain situations and events. We realize that not everyone will be pleased with every decision, every plan, and everything, that it is fluid, it's moving, and that we are doing our best. And so we ask for grace and courtesy and things like that along the journey. Virtual learning. As of yesterday afternoon, we received a call that what we thought was part of this plan, a key part of it, would be the ability to transfer to Edmond schools for some of our families, should they wish to have a virtual option. We are the only school district that they're allowed to accept out-of-district transfers from, and that is their policy. Having reached out to them a month or so ago, up until yesterday, I thought this was a deal and it was going to work out. But because of some other concerns, and I fully understand their concerns, so that's, I'm not in any way throwing them under the bus or just talking negatively. It's just that as we dig into the weeds, sometimes concerns come up that we have to consider that just were not considered at that earlier time. So due to that change, we are now investigating an option for a comprehensive virtual online school management system, curriculum, whatever you want to call it, for Oakdale. So we will continue to offer our own distance learning through Google Classroom. When there's a school closure, quarantine, a child is sick, or someone has to stay at home, just they have to maybe be gone for 2 weeks, we will continue with that plan. We also are going to ask our teachers to begin working right away to work with the students on their Chromebooks and learning how to utilize that tool and go to that, ramp that up as we approach those times. Currently, we are still will reopen with a single plan based on the most recent color-coded risk phase recommended by the State Health Department and the State Department of Education. We'll talk more, there's further slides as we get into this, but I wanted you to know that we are basing our revisions on the crosswalk that we did, aligning our current plan to what the State Health Department's recommended, to what the State Department of Education has recommended, finding where there are gaps or overlaps, and we have this revision to present to you today.
Okay, so just to hit a quick pause for, just make sure everyone's on the same page on this. So when we were last in here, we talked about the fact that we had the unique ability to transfer students into Edmond Public Schools, who has a robust virtual learning environment, and that was the way that we were going to approach virtual learning for Oakdale students. That changed, right? So is everyone clear just in terms of I'm more saying this for the communities than ours, because I know that we've each individually talked with Dr. Pierce about that. Rather important disruption in our plan, but that's the key driver on what's making us now reconsider our virtual learning, is the primary option for reasons that are out of our control is now an option.
And let's put that in perspective. On 692 students, how many students are we specifically talking about number-wise? How many
Reported to
that
the
wanted to
office,
do the virtual learning option out of 692?
those that reported to us saying that they were going to apply to Edmond for that option
Yes.
was, I think, 10.
10.
Okay. Out of 37 total that said they were coming.
Right.
So the 30, yeah, so we had 37 that were either going to go another option, have their homeschool, whatever else. We had 10 that were going to exercise the transfer option.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, good, thanks for that clarification.
Very good. All right. So this is a new slide. The blue is some revisions to the previous slide. I kept that there. But Oakdale families always have parental choice and they have options. Although we want, we'd love to have all of our kids back, we just know that parents like to have choice about their child's education. So we are further investigating a virtual option for Oakdale, but we just still want to remind people that they always have options and other things available to them, but we will always warmly welcome them back as long as they still can prove that they're a resident of the district, and that to also be cautious if they do choose anything virtual, that there may be some legislation enacted that would impact their decision if they want to transfer in and out or in and out back again. There are some limitations to that. They're fairly recent legislation. On the left side of that, this happened yesterday evening. We found that there is part of Governor Stitt's Governor's Emergency Education Initiative. There was about $30 million awarded to the state. 12 million of that will be set for allowing schools to access digital content K through 12. And this is where we are exploring currently. There may be other options, but this would be something that would be free to our district. We would have to provide a teacher of record. I don't know how that will look yet, but it would be a virtual option that this group would also provide professional development to the schools, and we could open that up to, I think first would be our families that were denied transfer to Edmond. And as we explore this further, this could be another viable option should there be other families that are still, concerned about their choices. We just don't know enough details to fully release any of that. It's not even announced. This program was announced. The details have not yet announced because of the government contract approval system. So once that, I believe it might be announced today or very soon. So we are talking to the people that are managing this and know that they are willing to work with us. And it would be a very nice option for us that we, I think, could enact fairly quickly to provide an answer to those families on that list that we mentioned, as well as maybe some other families as well. But we just do not even have the details to be able to go further into that this time. This is the same as last time. We're minding the gap, social emotional learning, as well as learning gap. Edmentum is still available free through the state. We will still use that and for our students to be able to have a pathway. As far as precautions go, the edit in red, when we met with our public health advisory group, one of the pieces of advice, and the admin team came to the conclusion with them that the issue about taking temperatures for all kids, we asked them, what's the best advice? What would you recommend? And we came to the conclusion that parent screening is still a very good option. And so when we start talking about our leveled systems of the reopening plan, we're talking about now colored systems because we align to the State Department's recommendations. So when we get to green, yellow, or orange 1, we would still ask for parents to do that. But when we get to orange 2, then we would have staff screen them each morning upon arrival. That's one slight change. The other would be at the very bottom. We've had some questions about what about teachers? Can they wear face guards or shields, particularly some of the early childhood teachers? We have purchased some of those. We basically have said you can bring whatever you want to wear that you're comfortable with wearing. However, if we need to purchase something for you, let us know what it is and we will do that. So whatever their comfort level is, we want to do. Some of them have asked about the clear panel masks, so their lips can still be seen, especially when you're teaching phonemic awareness, some of those other things that's important in early childhood. And so we have ordered many different sorts of those. We also have a way now that we have the School Safe ID kiosk that's at the front office. We're having another one purchased for the 5th grade down where the nurse will be relocated. Teachers will come in or go sign in each morning there. It will ask them a series of just basic health questions. There's a device also that will just, it sits on a tripod. It will take their temperature real quickly. They record it and they proceed on in. So that's going to be an added layer of protection to all adults when they come in will be asked those questions and their temperature will be taken. And we have an additional kiosk being purchased to facilitate that. Going to the slide about, it says school nurse, again, reiterating about the temperature checks. And I believe everything else I already covered on there. But that's just a reiteration because sometimes we get questions dealing specifically about nurse-related things. We also have a public health advisory team that has met with the admin team. Their names are listed there. And we thank all of them for their input and wisdom as we proceed forward. This was the original flow chart that our nurse, Julie Harger, created and this is where we get lots of questions about what happens when a child is sick, what happens if they're suspected, what if they have a positive diagnosis, so this flow chart, we asked for that team to go back and also advise Mrs. Harger on any revisions that need to happen to this. And so Julie is here today. I don't think you need to say anything, but you have an updated flow chart that we will insert to the slide in the plan, but if you want to pass that around, you're welcome to. Is there any like major 30,000 foot view highlights to share? I think the things in red are edits.
Things are red and changes.
And the bottom left paragraph in the red with the symptoms, that was just something I found on CDC of a daily home screening for students guide. And it just came out like the 24th of July.
I think the day that we had our virtual meeting with this committee, it was the same time they released some things. We knew that this chart on the screen would have to be edited because this again is another moving target and there's new advice out about that. So we will get that inserted into the slideshow. We wanted you to be aware of that as well. Switching levels. This is another common question that we get. It's like, how do we know when we switch to a different plan or a different level or so forth? After aligning our plan with both the SDE guidelines and the state health department's guidelines, we realized we have to have a starting point from which we want to resume school. So my recommendation today, and I'll discuss this even further in the slides, is that we roll back the start date of school to August 20th. And if we were to start school today on July 30th, it would be, I believe we'd be on Orange 1. But it is on August 20th. It's yet to be determined. We don't know. But our recommendation is to start on the 20th at the level, that the county color level in which we are at that date. We realized that this would offer our students and faculty some stability, some consistency to get back into the routines, as well as just having a decision made that we proceed with. Our recommendation also is that we remain on this level for at least a month and then reassess beginning September 25th. Again, for stability, consistency, that, it might change. Now, if it changes to red, it goes higher, we probably close. But if it were to go down to a yellow or something like that, we feel like we probably ought to just stay at this to get that groundwork in and begin, again, offering consistency, stability, and things like that for our families. The advisory group also recommended using the county data that's available to us, although it was suggested that we also look at our zip code data that's Oakdale student data in that process. So it's in context, but relying heavily upon the county data. This is a sample. If you've not seen the state's guidelines, they have a color-coded system. That green is the goal. That's where we would like to get back to normal, whatever that might look like. Yellow is where we thought we were going to enter anyway on the Oakdale plan, Plan A, we call that. So we align those two, and we're transitioning to the color-coded system of green, yellow, orange 1, orange 2, and then red. In that process, I want you to know our thinking process. What we realize, the root of a lot of these decisions is about a continuum of social distancing. So we began brainstorming, the admin team and I, about the different types of social distancing and precautions that we could put into place, ranked from probably the very lowest thing that we would do to the highest. So this is kind of our thinking about that, going from just wearing a mask all the way to full implementation of distance learning and workflows. We realized that our teachers, flipping between plans, but the data from the county or from the state Department of Health comes out every Friday afternoon. We realized that it would be very difficult for teachers who are in the school and families to flip between plans week to week to week to week. We will take that decision very close to heart, and a very serious decision. We would look for trends and patterns, but when we ask teachers to prepare for school, we're asking them to, if we had to switch to distance learning, so go to red level, that maybe that first Monday would be a rocket review. They would be working on Edmonton, ExactPath, IXL, doing project-based learning, doing reading activities and things like that, so that synchronous live instruction could then begin the next day. So it gives them a day to get planning with their teams, et cetera, to really then on Tuesday, would then enact the rest of the instructional delivery model. And the last bullet talks about asking our teachers to really begin now thinking about what we're calling pocket plans, having those backup lesson plans in your back pocket. So in case we do have to move quickly, or if a classroom had to be closed, or who knows what the situation may be, that they would be prepared with lesson plans. And so backing school up allows us time for the teachers to be able to do these things.
Can we get a pause button real quick?
I would love to.
For the benefit principally of my board colleagues, what questions do you have so far? We've highlighted the red. We've highlighted the changes in red. Todd, for you and Aaron, what questions do you have that we need to get clarification on before we proceed into the next part, which blows out this in more detail?
Okay, are you going to go over more why we would want to change the start date to August 20?
Yes, so that's the slide as well.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. We'll move forward. This is where we would love, all of us would love to be, is back to normal, whatever that looks like. That will most likely take a while to get there. This is the slide that shows what we, Plan A, which aligns into the yellow level, that where we would hope to begin school if the data showed that we could do that. Right now it would be on orange 1, but I'm inserted here the recommendation to start school a week later to August 20th. And Aaron, here are the reasons why. First of all, we can use these additional 5 days for a deeper dive for our teachers to plan, work with their teams, for us to offer deeper professional development using all of these programs that are coming at us. We also ordered, I don't know how many Chromebooks for all the middle school students, so a couple hundred Chromebooks.
250.
We ordered those in early May, and they have not yet arrived. The projected arrival date is mid-August. So we think that it would be really good to have those here for our teachers to work with their students. So that's another rationale. We don't have to have them here to start school for a couple of days, but we really need them here pretty soon. And then also then it aligns to the EPS start date for our families that have students in 2 different school districts. Any questions about that?
No, just an observation that the Chromebook will take on the same dynamic as the N95 face mask, right, in this context. So whatever we're promised on delivery, my suspicion is we can count on it being later pushed back. I would assume that.
I don't know that pushing back 5 days guarantees us Chromebooks by, I mean, we're not living in that dream world that we have to talk with our admin team to say, how could we go ahead and start school on the 20th and still begin doing some things, building relationships with kids, talking about classroom procedures, those things that we would do anyway, then get the Chromebooks in and begin that.
Dr. Chris, we have a plan that if we, say we started school on the 13th or the 20th, we do have some Chromebooks in our building.
We're not out of Chromebooks.
We can distribute those to the student body that the principals feel like has the highest need would be for middle school kids. So we could do that, and then when our other shipment comes, we distribute it to the lower grades. So that's an option.
Right. Thank you, Mike. The other recommendation on this slide is starting school on Orange 1 and remain there.
Before we
Yes,
get off that, Aaron, did we adequately hit August 20? The other, I would, again, just so no one misses it, the announcement from, I believe it was yesterday, was that Edmond has pushed back to the 20th. And so, again, we're not taking all of our cues from Edmond Public Schools, but that's a notable fact, but I just want to make sure everyone's clear.
Exactly. And another, I think, bullet point or two on here, back to that point about the later start date is not only will our teachers be able to dive deeper into some of these planning and training things, but it also allows us time with teachers to do a couple trial runs of this plan, to do some walkthroughs. How does parent drop off look? Do we have enough people on duty? How does the flow work? We can actually do walkthroughs. We've also discussed, and it's still in the infantile planning stages, but maybe some jump starts, boot camps, where we don't have a name for it yet, to which maybe during those extra 5 days, we could have, like our 5th grade students, for example, have never been in that new wing. Probably many of you have never been in the new wing either. So if we could set up a time to invite in small groups, some students to come up and just drop off their school supplies, or just come see the room and then be picked back up. That would give us time to do some of those things that we probably wouldn't be able to do if we had to start sooner. The other recommendation on here is the Orange Level 1 remain there for several weeks. Again, I think I touched on that on the previous slide, but then we would begin reassessing the Friday in September. Then we would then begin the possibility of switching levels at that time. The advisory group did recommend that we make careful decisions and use the county data, although we would consider the context, the trends, the patterns, the zip code data, the Oakdale data, all those things that come into the decision making, but that would be the trigger point for that.
Could we do it real quick, since we haven't spent much time on the levels, and since we have Dr. Leopard here,
Yes.
we do 10 seconds just to make sure everyone's clear on what does it look like to move from Orange Level 1 to Orange Level 2, because that's sort of where we're living right now.
Yeah, I'll introduce, is this the slide that you're referring to?
Yep.
Dr. Jennifer Leopard, one of our own family parents here at Oakdale, is serving on the committee, and she is like the guru of maps and color codes, I would say. She would not say that, but I would say that. So would you like to kind of answer Mr. Alfred's question?
Sure, so the question is really about where we got to the guidelines. Well, we took them from national levels.
I am sorry, can you take your mask off when we are watching the online? It's terrible sound.
Sure, I understand, as long as you guys are okay with it. The guidelines were taken from national levels. We do have a special level at our state level that we don't see at the national level, which is the red. And that's based on our ability to actually respond. And so that's not based on the number of cases. Green, yellow, and orange is based on the cases. So as of right now, the state guidelines do not have anything for an orange level 2. We are talking about trying to change that because this is actually a recommendation of the Board of Education to have the second orange level. So it doesn't line up right now, but we do feel like it's probably easier for the public to be able to follow it, to have an orange 2 that we would have on the state map versus what you guys are looking at here. This is going to be across the whole state. So again, green, yellow, orange is based just on cases at the county level. That it's based on a rolling day, a rolling 7-day average. And then red is basically orange plus without the ability to respond with PPE and ICU beds.
So Dr. Leonard, the change, so we're living in Orange 1 right now.
Yes.
And just since that's where we are, help us understand what would it look like to move from Orange 1 to Orange 2? Because that's probably where most people are going to be watching the data.
Yes.
What would that mean for us to numerically or?
Numerically, yes. So right now, Orange Level 1 is set at 14 per 100,000 cases. To go to Orange Level 2 would be 25 per 100,000. Oklahoma County right now is hovering in the low 20s. So it's very possible that we could slide up to 25 in the next week or so. I will say, if you've been following the news, we've had some troubles with our system that does all of the case counts. And so we had a backlog last week, and this week we've noticed that it's kind of created a little bit of a spike. And so we're very aware that we want to make sure that we don't accidentally bump a county into the next level because we're making a backlog. So we're trying to smooth that out. But as of right now, I looked yesterday, we were in the low 20s.
And to get this information, there's a link, correct?
Yes. So if you go to coronavirus.health.ok.gov, you can see, if you click on the top left side of the page, you will see it says COVID-19 alert system. You can click on that, and then you'll see a color-coded map. And like I said, right now, orange is one level. But if you click on the links there, you can go to the actual map itself, and it'll show you the number of cases per 100,000 per county. And where the Board of Education set Orange Level 2 is 25 per 100,000. So we really are hovering around that. And we discussed this on the phone on our Zoom call the other day with the others, how we go into our first week of session, our first week of our school year, knowing that we're hovering around that. Hopefully we'll have more information by then. It's still a few weeks out to be able to know. Thank you.
I think I just closed our presentation. Let me reopen that real quickly.
Where do we open it?
I closed that window by accident. I need to reopen this.
Okay, so as you do that, board members, what other questions do you have here?
I know we have the link, I think it's in the reopening plan.
I think there's an embedded link.
Yes, can we put that somewhere on the website, more obvious, maybe on the school website, where parents can look at that?
Yes,
I
good.
think that would be helpful.
And I'll add that it will be updated every Friday. So Friday morning it's updated to try to give enough time. And we're providing an advanced copy of it to the Department of Education Thursday afternoon. So if it's not out to the public yet, you guys have a chance to review it hopefully.
So are we done discussing the levels? Are you done? Okay, I'll wait.
Okay. So we said, we went through the yellow. This would be the Oakdale plan for the layers of protections and things, social distancing and masks. Teachers would teach in person in the classrooms. There would still be those multiple layers of precautions. Think sliced Swiss cheese again. Second and third grade teachers would go to the students rather than rotating. Fourth and fifth grade teachers have consistent seating charts. They do some rotating. And then athletics and activities would only be offered by their governing body or organization's recommendations. This is where we hoped that we were entering, a month ago. Going to Orange Level 1, this is what we previously thought would be B, where we had built in firewall dates that we would have predicted breaks, but we know that nothing right now is predicted. So that plan is not going to work for us. So we went back to think of the social distancing continuum. And I think of this about the commercial or the video that I shared with you about building the airplane while you're flying it. You're still flying that airplane. Right now we're in a seat and we're buckled up. So I think yellow is like you're buckled and ready, you're flying. Orange, level 1, you're tightening the belt more. Orange, level 2, it's even tightening it all the way as you possibly can. So our plan is that we look at the social distancing continuum. And Orange, level 1 then would be still continue with in-person instruction, but using a cohort and block schedule model so that our students are assigned to their homerooms or a cohort all day. Teachers rotate to those students. The cohorts eat together at lunch, eat lunch together. Middle school would implement block scheduling, so that means they can go to half their classes one day, the other half, they have half as many rotations and changes, so there's less exposure, or at least less transitioning. And identified special populations attend in person throughout these plans. So for example, a student with an IEP, we would follow their IEP the requirements, but we have an entrance where they can enter. We know that we have a very good staff to student ratio there. We have teachers' assistants that we can social distance and continue with their educational plan. Extracurricular activities or athletics only if they're able to social distance. Orange 2, again, tightening the seatbelt a little bit more, would be what we looked at the YMCA childcare model. And if you've seen across the nation, and actually we had some communication with the downtown YMCA folks and some of their summer programs and childcare programs, they have had very little outbreaks. I'm sure there's been some kids sick, but I think they contain those very well. So what did they do that worked? They have a family model in which they have strict cohort grouping. So students are assigned to a counselor all day as a family. And then they think of the larger cohort group might be your neighborhood and then the city and then your state. So we took that concept and thinking about Plan C, Orange 2 would be strict social distancing within family groups where we could still offer attendance daily. Again, the same precautions, health screenings each morning. That's the addition. Students learn with their family group all day. They would not switch classrooms for anything. Middle school students will stay within a 3rd-hour class. Our special populations would still attend in person. No extracurricular activities or athletics. We feel like part of the positives to this plan, the rationale is that we feel like this is an opportunity for Oakdale to be innovative and personalized within the context of our community. We think of this plan as 2 different things. It could be, think of it as distance learning at school. I think of it maybe as perhaps like a one-room schoolhouse with just all the new added technology in it. We feel like this is a benefit for parents that have work schedule or childcare concerns, that they would not have to make that their students could still come to school unless their family or neighborhood would have to be quarantined, in which case we would have to flip that switch anyway. And we also believe this would be better contact tracing when there is an exposure diagnosis or quarantine, that we would be able to isolate that down to a family or neighborhood group. I'll pause there for a moment. The next, well, I'll show you one more slide. That's red. That's where we just go full distance learning. We would still let our special populations attend. Employees come to school and they're just doing distance learning from here at school. Probably most of the questions are going to be right here. Dr. Linder, could you, I know you're on, we had a long discussion about this. Could you give your opinion about like what we talked about or your advice about this versus, now, I'm going to interrupt you before you start. We debated, the question was that we asked our teachers, we asked this committee, should we do the AV model such as like Edmund is doing, or is this a better plan? And we landed on this plan. For various reasons, so many of which I named there, that we feel like are the benefits that go in this route. So, you might have anything to add to that?
Sure. My thoughts when I saw this is I'm very proud of this. This is very innovative. One of the things that's really hard for me is that I can see the public health challenges, but I have 2 little girls. My youngest is going to be in pre-K, and my oldest is going to be in 1st grade. And this is hard on them. They don't quite understand it yet, and we're doing our best, but trying to pull them in and out of school is a really challenging thing. We have a hard time following that. And then even block is difficult for them to do. Having the security and going to the same classroom every single day with the same friends, I think is really important. This is very scary to some of the younger ones. I think this is a very safe way for us to do something that I think a lot of other people don't have the expertise that we have here to know about. And actually, I'm very proud of you guys for coming up with this. It's I think the way everyone will eventually go, and I think we're going to be ahead of the curve on this.
I also believe that there, like I said, not every plan is perfect, and not everyone will be happy with every plan that we suggest. I only know potentially one other school that's looking at this in the metro area, and so I think it could open us up for some criticism. But I also think that it has more benefits at this point in time, especially when we start talking about contact tracing and having to isolate certain groups of students. Instead of quarantining a family or a neighborhood, if we went to an AB, we may have to quarantine a grade level or a middle school or an elementary school at that time because of just the traveling of students and rotations.
And I will add that with the numbers we have at this point, everyone will probably be quarantined at this point. Everyone in this room will. And I have been too, and it was all fine. But we have to recognize that trying to do that in a way that is least disruptive to our overall student body, I think is the ultimate goal. And that's the other part of this really love, is it allows us to take that and not have everybody impacted, to keep that impact as minimal as possible.
The last comment I would make before we go and take some questions, but I think we also realize that we are very blessed at Oakdale to have a lot of support and family participation and experts in our backyard that we can call upon. We also have students that need school. We also have students that have situations in their family lives and things that depend on school for their emotional well-being, for their physical safety, for their nutritional needs, all those other things. While it may be a small population here, we still have some of those students that we have to keep our eye on those other groups as well.
All right, so again, thanks Dr. Leopard and others who have served on the advisory group that was pulled together quickly, but with a great deal of expertise. So for the board, let's just take the matters up. I have a couple of questions I've scribbled down, but why don't we just hit it? So things that are front of mind for you. Go ahead.
I know at this point, we may not know exactly our enrollment, but what size do you see this family group being for?
We would see a family group being a homeroom. Mrs. Pierce's classroom in 3rd grade, that would be the family. Now, we are very fortunate and we have a long-standing history at Oakdale to invest in our teachers, to invest in low class sizes. So that would be, I mean, I don't think we have any classes probably around 20-ish.
In middle school, it'll probably max 17. Yes.
We also know architecturally, some of these classrooms are larger than other schools. So while we may not be able to do extreme social distancing, but we feel with our numbers, the architecture, the family group would be in middle school, a 3rd-hour teacher, and in elementary would be their homeroom teacher.
Okay, so my primary question, again, I think this is fantastic. Given where we hover between orange level 1 and orange level 2, and the likelihood that we're going to go to orange level 2, I mean, it's just mathematically, we're probably going to be there, probably shortly after we start school, and the resumption of school probably compels us to get to orange level 2. Is there a reason not to begin at orange 2? And this, I'm just asking. I'm asking that as thought from my board colleagues and for you, Dr. Pierce. Given the incremental changes when you move from our plan B to plan C, that compels me to wonder, should you just start with plan C? But that's a
Do you mind if I jump in there for just a second?
fantastic.
Okay. So from a middle school perspective, this family cohort group, although we love it, is the hardest in middle school. And so if we start school in our 3rd-hour class and don't get teachers in to introduce and get the kids on Google Classroom in their respective classes, that's going to be really difficult for us. Although I have come up with a plan for teachers maybe to rotate in to 3rd hour a couple of days a week. That still would really help us out if we were still on orange level 1 when school started and able to get to every class in a block setting. And then when we move to orange level 2, everybody's set up and ready to go.
I also believe probably at the time that we created that, we were feeling the numbers were below the 20s as well. So this is new information for us to know what it was looking like yesterday. So, I mean, conceivably, we could start at orange 1 or higher should the numbers indicate that. It creates some things, but they're ready for it. Any other questions, discussion? There are a few more slides, but I think there are minor changes, but we can click through those, but we will certainly take pause now for any comments about the color codes.
Yeah.
I think this is great, you know, a way for us to stay open, and I think that's what parents are looking for. I think could we go over maybe what parents can do to help the school? I know you guys are doing everything you can to try to open the school and keep it open. What can parents do to help? And I know number one would be health screening every morning
Yes.
before they come to school. Wearing a mask, showing kids how to properly wear the mask before school even starts. And then how are we doing on substitutes?
To answer that question, yes, on the first 2 points. This third point about substitutes, we have an arrangement with 2 of our regular substitutes that will basically be a full-time substitute. We'll have a substitute here every day. So they're going to agree to collectively work half of the sub days a year if we were in school every day. So we have 2 ladies that have agreed to do that. So we have basically a full-time sub already on board, should we have to use that. The other tips I think would also be, some of our younger kids have trouble opening their lunches. If we're having lunch in the classroom, we don't want to be handling food. Teachers don't want to be doing that. So if those little cups with the mandarin oranges are hard and the juice goes flying everywhere, I mean, we need practice on that. Or make it simple, it's easy to eat, and dispose of easily, that we don't have to touch food. I think the mask practicing, yes, the endurance level as well, probably. The food items, was there anything else that, I know the main one was, the main thing parents can do is, while we try to do all of these practices all day long, should, when they go home, ignore all of these, a lot of our work here is going to be undone. So I think to help us to get our community to a more, a lower level or higher level, however you view it, to get back to green, we're going to have to work collectively together to make that happen. To make that happen, you know, we can do what we can here, but if it's not, although to some degree anyway, outside of here, it's just going to make it longer. Anything else you have?
All right, now Trish, why don't you push on through the balance of the changes?
I will try to. The change here is just about reentry. We had these kiosks I mentioned earlier. We have asked all of our specials teachers to create protocols for their own classrooms, and they are experts in their field. We realize they may have to modify their curriculum. For example, in music, you may be learning about music, but not yet singing, things like that. So there will be, and those rooms are large, they can social distance, they can go outside. There are a lot of things in between, and they've been working very hard. In this presentation, there is a link, that red line is a link to that slide document, the plans they have currently. The other thing is, I believe it's an item later to be approved, hopefully, is the sound amplification system technology available in every classroom. It's a Bluetooth device to where a teacher can wear a microphone so that they can be better understood and heard in the classroom, particularly with wearing masks. We have some technology money, bond money, as well as we have some CARES money that we can use to help with this as well. And minus COVID is a very good instructional practice as well, just for kids, even with auditory processing. It's not necessarily about a hearing loss, it's about the ability to listen well. Outdoor recesses, same thing, except just if we were on Orange 1 or 2, it changes slightly. Maybe they'd be in a cohort group, or they would, go about their recesses that way. We also, yesterday, were looking at and purchasing a new system that students would wait in their classrooms at the end of the day for their car or bus to arrive. And parents would be having like a car tag to hang in their mirror with a number, and the teacher outside through the app or her device, with he or her device, could enter the car number. It projects on the classroom screen with the student's picture and their name, and they say, Joe Pierce, your car is number 733, you're out here, go to drop off A, wherever our drop off pickups are. So we are planning to move forward with that so that those can be flashed on a screen. Other schools have used this in the past, and it reduces the times usually for their pickup times. We can also use it for bus loading, but we can say bus 43, we have the queue, we can click who's on that bus. There are other additional features that I won't go into now, but the parents will be very pleased. It has some geofencing type things. The bus is 5 minutes away. It has a lot of features that will be, I think, well received. So we're eager to look at that. I think it will also help with social distancing, not having them all queued up on the sidewalk outside. Athletics, events, and clubs. Gosh, this one's a tough one. We've asked our committee to take a look at this a little bit more. We want to do what we can. We also realize that there's various opinions about the ability to social distance depending upon the activity or club or sport. So we have time also, if we move back to August 20th, that we still have time to get some additional advice there. Facility use, my recommendation is that we would have no facility rentals or group rentals in the school, particularly the main and auxiliary gyms, fine arts, pods, classrooms, or any space where we have students held, that we would not use that for any reason for the first semester. And then we keep the outdoor facilities, keep them open as much as feasible. And then we also added a thing here about snacks. We realized that sometimes parents send snacks to school or whatever. Classroom snacks, we would ask them to be individually purchased and then brought from home, that there would be no group snacks or sharing or treats, things like that brought into the classroom. So those are minor things that we get into the weeds, and these are things that we get asked. So
I do have a question for Mike. How many of the Metro athletic conference schools are not participating in extracurricular activities this fall?
You know, I've only heard of one school that has made a decision.
Millwood?
No.
Millwood is not.
Millwood, that would be the second one. Independence Charter, they're similar to us. They're not having any athletics for the first quarter, 9 weeks. That was the decision they made. Millwood, they had a meeting a couple days ago, so did they do?
They're doing high school, they're not doing middle school. So I mean, there's kind of, at some point, you may just not have competitors that actually have extracurricular activities.
There are several schools in our conference that are private schools.
Right.
So that has a little bit of influence. I talked to athletic directors, Mustang, Edmond, those are big districts with high schools, different priorities, but as far as I understand, Edmond's going to follow a plan similar to ours in regards to the code of the county.
How's the participation then in the practices that are ongoing now leading up?
Well, we haven't had any official practice.
Well, I mean, unofficial practice. I won't even say practice, I'll just say gatherings, summer conditioning programs that every school in the state is doing right now.
So for us,
Yes, for
volleyball specifically, they're the only ones that have access gone into our building. I think that the coaches have told me that anywhere from 15 to 20.
That's good. What about football?
Football, I'm not sure that they were meeting outside on the field, so I think 8 to 12 maybe.
Okay.
Excuse me. Information Day. We have some dates on here that we talked about bringing supplies. Obviously, if we do some little boot camps or jump starts, some of these dates may change. They might stay the same. I just put them in red so that you would be aware that those dates could slide. First day of school. Still working on this, what this might look like. The advisory team, currently what we had planned was to have all of the students, you dropped off, they could go to the football field, we could social distance, they could have class lines, we had banners, we had signs, we were going to have all these things and make it a very positive, fun thing. And when we approached the health advisory team, they all said, no. So that is not going to happen that way, and we're working on some other ideas. I don't even know, we've talked about pre-K, perhaps just having a very abbreviated first day. They get to come in, see their classroom, stay, they go. We've talked about maybe just having, like I said, the jump start times or something. We had the idea about maybe staggering arrival times or something like that. So we don't have this in place yet. So it's a work in progress, but we wanted to let you. We also are doing weekly FAQ answers sent out to all the families via my newsletter. And we will continue to do that as we get further information. The last thing I will show you is the very last slide about the school calendar. Bumping back to the 20th, this actually takes into consideration, there's the reasons again, starting with Orange 1, possibly a higher level, it sounds like. Staying on that level for a short time. When we look at bumping days back, eliminating 5 days of school still does meet the requirement for the state of 165 days of instruction. We also still meet the 1080 hours rule by this plan. It does not leave us any wiggle room should we have to have a snow day. Because the newest version of the attendance law is that you're either an hours district or a days district. We are an hours district, so you have to have instruction for 1,080 hours. They've added the stipulation that you must have 165 days of instruction or more. So between those two, we meet that requirement. Now, as you look further in the calendar, we have other days. This doesn't change any, back in the days, that doesn't change anything else up here. There is a week before Memorial Day that we were not going to have classes. I mean, we could change maybe some of the breaks, or we could have one of the professional development days coming back. Maybe we don't do that. We don't yet know. So we may come back with another revision, but it would probably be looking at breaks for those off days or extending the school year if we still had to do the 165. We're right there with this plan.
Well, given 2020, I would assume we're gonna have a giant blizzard. Probably apocalypse. Go back.
Maybe hurricane.
Okay, board, so, Dr. Pierce, I think the decision points, so from a standpoint of protocol, we had affirmed the back-to-school plan last week, between that pursuant to provisions that are likely forthcoming, both provisions are forthcoming. Of things that we probably need to nail down, though, a lot of these are going to be in flux, but the start date is one we need to, it seems we need to agree, because everything else is going to derive from August 20 or August, whatever. Seems that that's one on which we need to have a firm agreement discussion on. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We need to, I think parents would like to know when we're starting school.
Yeah, probably a good idea. Okay.
And because of our 165-day requirement, we wouldn't be able to move this day again. But August 20 is it, correct?
We would have to do something later in the calendar year if we had to add days back in.
Okay.
I'm truly not worried about that 165-day requirement. I think that,
Good point.
I've talked to Dr. Hine, I've talked to some other folks, just because of the circumstance and situation we're all in. I believe there'll be some mechanisms and policy change in place to not hold those hours or those days true. So pushing it back to me, we need to be as flexible as a district as we want to be. We'll take that on down the road, I think, and it'll be okay.
I feel like the 20th is a reasonable take, going to August 31st or September, unless there's some, I don't think that those additional days would help prepare us any further. And I don't know that the numbers are going to change that dramatically. So I think this is a reasonable first step, knowing that we may have to make alignments along the way.
I mean, was there any thought or discussion saying, hey, we're going to start after Labor Day. We're going to give all these districts that are starting, because most are starting between the 13th and the 25th, I believe, in the entire state. And they're all got different plans. Everybody's doing something different, it seems. And you wait until after Labor Day and you just kind of see what plan worked the best for what school district. I mean, was there any thought to that?
There's some, but I think the feedback from parents and the things between all the admin staff and talking with other families is that the consensus seemed to be that they wanted to go in.
And again, our rationale for the 20th is threefold, right? It was preparation, the additional preparation time for backline staff to be prepared. It does marry up with EPS, but also the Chromebooks, trying to give some time to get those, let those trickle in. So that we would push back seems to be general concurrence here is the right call. Todd raises the, should we push back even further? If we're comfortable saying, let's hit it on a date that marries up with the logic of EPS. I think that completely agree with that, but okay, Erin, what do you think?
I just wanting to give parents as much, notice as possible, and just if they prepare for August 20th, and then there's a possible change. I mean, just as soon as we can, let them know. And then, I mean, if we can start on the 20th, I think that's great. Everybody feels prepared by then.
I'm there too.
Questions?
Okay, I make a motion to change our start date from August the 13th to August the 20th, which is, what, is August the 20th a Thursday?
Yes, it's just 1 week.
1 week later,
Beyond
okay,
what
so
we go.
to August the 20th, Thursday.
Okay, I have a motion, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Marlene, you let that know that that carried unanimously. So we will begin school in person on August 20. I don't think we necessarily need to stipulate anything about what level we're going to begin at. That's going to be driven by county level data. And then we will make adjustments per Dr. Pierce and the team's planning as it goes. Do not quit.
I appreciate your comments at the first meeting. Thank you.
Okay. I believe that gets us all the way to the third agenda item. You want to go ahead and keep marching through on?
Yes, item number 4 is an attendance policy revision. It's attached in your assembled meetings document. I will highlight the significant changes. It does include a statement about students that have a fever or measured temperature greater than 100 should not be at school or activities, which is our current practice. This is in the policy. In the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down, it does indicate that we would have that how we would calculate chronic absenteeism would be as long as the determination of eligibility is made by we have a district medical exemption review committee that we would need to enact. That's another policy for another time, but this basically says this committee then, once enacted, would on a yearly basis report absences that would be medically exempt. Think state report card, chronic absenteeism factor. This would then permit us to have a committee that would say, well, these kids were absent because of they were hospitalized or they had to be at home or whatever. This gives us the latitude to say that they would be exempt from that. It also gives us latitude that in the very bottom of page 1, it defines how we would count if a student is present or not if we're distance learning. This says that they would not be counted absent if they were not physically here, but if they were in the distance learning program or a virtual program, if basically 3 factors, if they completed 90% of the activities, which would include, or the time of services provided, it could include things like logins to a program, curriculum or programs, offline activities, completed assignments, testing, Zoom meetings, teacher connections, they know that they're staying up with their student. If they're on pace for completion and that all the activities were conducted in a period of time during the academic year. So it gives us really 3 criteria to say, are you on pace? Are you completing activities? Are you staying in contact with the school and the teacher? We could still count them present as a distance learning student.
That's in total, not just per assignment, in total.
Right. Right. It's not that say you have to make it 90% on every assignment.
You're just participating.
Yes, it's that no less than 90% of the time that services were provided, that they were, they completed the activities.
Right.
Right. We also have language in there on page 2. There's a section on absences by arrangement. Current practice is a student may take up to 3 days of absences by arrangement per semester. We would just put that into the policy. An unexcused absence, if it doesn't fall within one of those categories named earlier in the policy, that work would be able to be made up, and that then there's a thing about truancy also that when you're absent without knowledge of parents or the school, then you would be considered truant. And then the last paragraph talks about chronic absenteeism, highlighting the sentence in the middle of that paragraph that says, when a student is identified as chronic absentee, the superintendent shall designate communication with parents to let them know. Our plan would be something along the lines of whenever we issue quarterly report cards, if a student at that time in the year was considered chronically absent, missing more than 10% of the instructional time, we would contact those parents to let them know, okay, by definition, you're chronically absent. But we also have this committee too in place that we could make that work so that they're not counting against us in scoring of the state programs. And COVID-related absences would be considered a significant medical condition under this policy. So those are the terms of the changes to that policy.
Okay. Board, are you clear on the changes? And if so, or not, what questions do you have?
I move to approve the revision of the attendance policy FDC-R1.
Okay, have a motion? Second, all in favor of approval? Motion carries unanimously, thank you. Dr. Pierce, let's go on to the online instruction.
Yes, we have an online instruction policy. This includes, I believe it's about the third line of paragraph 1 that says the district may provide a virtual instruction or distance learning program on dates to be determined by the superintendent. Power shall be provided by the board so that the students of the district may be allowed to continue instruction in the event of a school closure or an emergency. This then takes us a step further, saying we have to switch to one of the other levels, and I have to say, okay, we're going to switch to distance learning. It's in policy that I have the authority to do that. It also talks about as much advance notice as possible. We would obviously communicate with you ahead of time, things like that. It has a lot of other definitions that are already in place about synchronous and asynchronous. I will not go through that. That's already in our policy. But this does highlight those things related to the distance learning programs.
Okay. Board, what questions do you have?
I move to approve the revision on online instruction policy EHDF.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. And then item 6, Dr. Pierce.
This policy is called the School District Screening Protocol, and this is a new policy in an effort to mitigate spread of illness, et cetera, or a public health crisis. It says that the district may implement the following protocol. Second paragraph, that it encourages parents, guardians, and employees to self-screen at home, but it also further states that if a student or employee has a temperature of 100 or higher, they would remain at home until they are then fever-free for 24 hours. And the third paragraph, that one-line sentence also says the district may screen any individual who enters the facility with a screening process that would include taking temperatures, asking health-related questions, and isolating those that have symptoms of a communicable disease. So this is a new policy saying that we basically ask, yes, those 5 or 6 questions from the CDC that they recommend, take their temperature, things like that. This is publicly known. We would be able to do that.
And that, obviously, cross-check that with the provisions of the reopen plan. Okay,
Yes, sir.
what questions do you have, Board?
I move to enact the new school district screening protocol policy ECA.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, item 7, contemplate spending some bond money for the amplification system. Mr. Kranz, have that one, or do you?
I can discuss it as well. This is the sound amplification system for each classroom so that we can get those ordered and on the way here, knowing that there may be some delays, but we want to get them ordered ASAP. We just need to be able to enact that so that they can be ordered. I don't know if you want to talk further about what the system looks like or what it would be. You have any?
Saw the picture of the.
Yeah, I think I attached the document we got from the company. We did price these with other competitors. This seemed to be the best choice for us going forward, especially with consistency of product and the fact that the new technology allows for Bluetooth versus hardwiring and all the other things that older systems have had.
I move to approve the Fontra sound amplification systems in the amount of $36,996.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Item 8, Dr. Pierce, I'll grab the reins on her if you don't mind. So we have, as discussed with the community and shared more broadly, constituted a public health advisory group. What I will say is we have an embarrassment of riches with respect to medical professionals in Oakdale, for which we are tremendously grateful. We have 4 folks who have agreed to serve on this. It is not dispositive, it's not exclusive. In fact, we will continue to get a lot of input from folks that are interested and capable and well-trained to provide input, all of which we consider. It happens that these 4 were ready at the helm, willing to serve. Dr. Leper I will brag for a moment. We worked together for a short, happy time during COVID, and we have an extraordinary resource from Dr. Weber and her colleagues on this group and throughout Oakdale. So we are very, very, very fortunate. I will tell you that Jennifer sits at the very nexus. You couldn't get a better insider in terms of the Oklahoma State Department of Health because she sits where it most matters. So is that giving us an unfair advantage? I hope so. Thank you, and thank everyone who has provided input. Again, it matters a great deal. This is extraordinarily complex. The number of folks who have successfully navigated a global pandemic at this time, currently living is 0. So we all come at this with expertise, but humility as well. We appreciate it very much. It is the case that we're naming these folks constituting a group that we felt we should do that in official capacity. So we do propose naming that these will be our health advisory group. Any questions? I think we've already been relying on their expertise. But any questions from the board?
I move to approve the health advisory group members for 2020.
I would just say we'll go through 21 on that, just to stipulate, and hopefully not further. But with that, those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, I believe that wraps this working sessions group on COVID and all things related to the pandemic. Thank you for your patience, particularly for our guests. We didn't come for that part. You came for our other playing part. Here, it's 11:11. We've been in here for 71 minutes. Let's stand and stretch real quick. Please don't exhale unless you have your mask on. And then we'll start in on the planning for session 2. Yes.
Karen Davis. My name is Clarkson. There's a bunch of
Oh my gosh. See, I just haven't seen them. I'll see it. Yeah, Karen Davis. I'm singing to you.
Yes.
It's just been a long time. We were enough. Yes. So, yeah, I was saying, my son. Oh, so good. Yes. I'm not saying that I'm
I do. I'm a fifth grader.
Stuff for special
In other places. Yeah, right. So we're going over it to my niece and. Or I think the biggest thing is.
If I end stream, it's gonna stop it. If I end the stream, it's gonna stop it and not be able to come back on.
Yeah, yeah.
And then my, I love it too.
issues.
You got it?
think so.
Tell me, go now.
I'll let you know.
Okay, well, we will reconvene this special session, specifically our work group here. I believe it's 11:19, Marlene. So having so reconvened, this is our work session in which we will discuss the big picture stuff that we have to do. Thank you particularly again to our guests who have joined today. For those tracking the agenda closely, this is item 9 on our agenda, short and long-term goals. Dr. Pierce, I'll kick it over to you, and let's just get to work in this work session.
At our last special meeting work session, as part of the plan to look at future initiatives, programs, master planning, we realized that we need to have experts come and advise us on some of the next steps. We know some of the required next steps, but we also need to know our position when it comes to talking about bonded indebtedness and what the outlook is, as well as master planning, finances, and so forth. So I think we could just turn it over, I guess, Ron, probably, you're kind of the money guy helping with that. That's some of the things. Todd, do you want to chime in on this too? I think you were kind of had your eye on some of these things about some of the past bond issues and what the future outlook might look like for Brookdale.
Boy, that's a loaded question.
Okay, Ron, would you guys bring us up to speed on
Let's have Ron set the stage for us now.
Start with the facts and figures.
Yeah.
Can we put the little master planning thing up on the board?
Let me get it
Will
up.
they be able to see that?
Yes, I would.
Because then as we talk the little pillar specifics, it may be, the context may be a little bit easier to follow. And if not, that's okay.
While Dr. Pierce is pulling that up, I handed out a set of documents to each of the board members. And you have to know, I'm not really going to go through each and every one of these. So I'm just going to try to hit the high points. I wanted to give you all the information just in case you need it at some point. The first page is a history of your net assessed valuation. 27 years ago, your valuation as a district was 7.6 million. Last year it was 107 million. So obviously you've had a whole lot of growth, over the last almost 30 years. Last year was actually your lowest growth rate during that period. You only grew 1.8% last year. So as a conservative step, that's the growth rate we use going forward. We don't have the 2021 valuations yet. I talked to Nancy Grantham at the state auditor's office yesterday. The public service figures are going out to the county tomorrow. And then the county will go through their process. State Board of Equalization, the County Board of Equalization will meet and approve the values, and I'll send out new valuation reports. And once we get that, we can update the numbers.
What kind of time frame do you think before that equalization board comes up with that?
They're usually should be within the month. Oklahoma's county especially is usually pretty quick on it because they get a lot of people pressuring them. And like I said, I used 1.8% going forward. I would normally say that is really low, but with COVID-19 and everything else, I'm not saying anything at this point. So it's just, right now it's just a placeholder. Like I said, hopefully within the next month, we'll be able to fine tune it a little more. There are some schedule numbers in the lower right-hand corner of each page. Schedules 2.1 through 2.5 relate to your outstanding issues, which you started 2020-21 with 4 issues outstanding. You paid one of them off on July 1st. So that was the issue from 2015. It's paid off and gone. You've got another one from 2015 November, which it pays off November 1st. Both of those actually came off the tax rolls last year. You're right in the middle of your 2018 issue. You've got 3 levy periods left on it, including this one. The 2019 issue, we only have 1 levy period, it's just this year. So if you look at schedule 2.5, this is where it ties it all together and kind of shows you what's happening to your sinking fund right now. So the highlighted area in yellow, that was last year. So it's a historical fact. Your millage rate at that time was 27.14 mils. Because you had those two issues come off the tax rolls, your millage is dropping this year to somewhere around 15.5. And if you don't do something, it's going to drop down to 937 next year, 893, and then down to 0. There's nothing we can do about the 15.5 this year. But anything we do from this point forward will go on the tax rolls next year. So there's going to be probably a gap, where it went from 27 down to 15, back up to whatever your target is.
But let's remember, when we went to 27, there was an increased gap.
Right, and there's, I've got a graph on it, show for the back, so we'll cover it. Schedules 3.1 through 3.5 are the kind of the first round of projections. The first new money issue I've got is dated March 1 of 21. That is assuming that we would vote in January, and then you could get your money as early as March 2021. I used a target millage rate of 22 mils, which was kind of the middle of the road for what your millage rate's been for the last several years. So that's kind of a good starting point. I used a short maturity, that 3-year, and you'll see this on schedule 3.4. But if we do this first one on a 3-year, it comes off at the same time as your 2018 issue, which means there's going to be a big drop off, which means you can do another big issue at that time and just kind of keep them rolling. That next big issue in 22 is 4.9 million and change. So we go from about 2.8 to 4.9, and then the final one I've projected so far is 5.1 million. And you get all of those by July of 2024. So again, if you look at schedule 3.4, the projections in green are the new money. Starts in March of 21, and I just went through July of 24. And you see the way they're structured, each one's on the tax rolls for only 2 years, and it keeps your millage rate right around 22 mils throughout the line. And then if you wanted to extend it out, basically you could do a little over 5 million every 2 years after 24. It just depends how far you wanted to go out, or if you wanted to obligate yourself for 4 or 5 series of bonds at one election, or if you want to do one election, per project. Oakdale's a little different than most districts because of the evaluation and being an elementary district. Even though you've got, needs, you're not needing to build a new elementary school every couple of years, but you've got to dedicate several years worth of stuff or bond issues. Now, if you guys, of the room ever want to go K-12, you're going to have to obligate several years worth of bond issues and probably try to advance fund that so you can get it built at one time. But until we get serious about that conversation, I'm not going to, really dwell on it. So schedule 3.5, like Todd mentioned, this is kind of showing where your sinking fund has been. That 15.5 is the lowest it's been in at least the last 10 years. But if you look over, once it flatlines, that's at that 22 level. And if you kind of just go back and look to the left, it looks like that's pretty close to what the average would have been, just because of the ups and downs of that graph. And again, all of this is based on last year's valuation. These numbers are going to be different when we get your new valuation. The interest rate I used on the first 2 series of bonds, I think, was a 1.5%, which seems low. That's almost double what we're actually seeing right now, because interest rates are so low on municipal debt. The Fed met Tuesday and Wednesday and basically said they're going to keep the rates where they are, and don't be surprised if they go lower. So It's a great time to borrow money, but that's about the only time, or only thing it's good for right now. So the next set of schedules, I did approach it a different way. You're still getting your money in March, the first year. But the first one, instead of being a 3-year bond, is a 5-year bond. So you get a bigger amount up front. The reason I didn't, or I looked at it both ways, is because over the same time period, you end up with a little bit less money if you do the big one up front, just because it's financed for longer. And rule of thumb is the longer you go out, the higher the interest rate. Because at some point, the economy is going to turn back around, and investors are usually optimistic that it's going to be, 3 or 4 years. We may have time to deal with COVID and everything else, and rates are going to start to rise, and they want to make sure they're earning as much as somebody else might be. If you have them on, the 2 or 3 year maturities, odds are there's not going to be a lot of change between now and then, unfortunately. So that's, like I said, that's why I kind of looked at it that way. But if you will go to schedule 4.4, it looks relatively similar. Over this time frame, you get about 12.5 million in those 3 years, or I'm sorry, between 21 and 24. And it's the same thing after 24, you could do a little over 5 million a year, or every other year, I'm sorry. It just kind of depends how far you wanted to go out. So that's 12.5. And yeah, it's pretty comparable which way you wanted to do it. One of the other reasons I did it where we had the smaller one up front, I just didn't know what needs you might have right now. I mean, if you don't need 5 million, you don't necessarily need to borrow 5 million, even though rates are really low. Again, if you do a longer maturity, they creep up a little bit. So it just it goes back to what you guys need, what parameters you want as far as the sinking fund, millage rate, all of this stuff is flexible. So that's just, that's where we need feedback from you guys and the architects, construction managers, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, anything we do is going to get probably a tax increase compared to this year. If you look at it more compared to over the past, you're just getting back where they were. Right now, you're paying somewhere, or last year you paid somewhere around a total of 92 mills. So 1 mill is a little bit more than 1% as far as the tax increase. So if you got it back up to 22, compared to this year, that's about 7 mills. So it'd be about a 7% increase.
But this year, we went from 107
Oh,
mills
right,
to 99,
exactly.
there was a decrease in
Right.
taxes.
Right, you're exactly right, and that's what you got to explain to your patrons. And
A significant decrease.
right, and the reason I keep bringing it up is because if you vote in January, they will have already gotten their tax bills and paid this year. They would have paid based on the 15.5. If we were voting, if we had September or October election dates this year, you'd still be comparing to last year. They would still have the drop off in between, but it's a different way of presenting it to the public. And that's all I mean is that they're getting a tax holiday. You just have to make sure they understand that. And even though there may be a difference in their taxes between 2021 and 2022, it's still less than what they were paying. But again, that's going to be how you guys have to present it or want to present it. And the way it used to be, we would look at a bond issue and see, what your valuation was, and basically 10% of that's what your total capacity was. So, back in the day, it would have been 700,000. And then talk to the architect, and we've got 700,000 to spend on a project. What can you do? Financings have evolved. Now you talk to the architect, tell him what you need. They kind of tell us what it's going to cost, and we tell you how you get there. So it's a lot different than it used to be. And I've been doing this for maybe 27 7 years in October. So I've been through all of it, you know, so it's interesting. At least for me, maybe not for everybody else, but for me.
Super clear.
Yeah. Why do you think, it dropped to 1.8?
I have no clue.
Okay.
Oklahoma County is strange because I can't remember who the current assessor is. I don't think it's Leonard Sullivan
It's
anymore.
not Leonard Sullivan, it's the guy after him.
But Leonard always said, we're going up 3% a year because our property values, your market values are so far behind, or are so far ahead of what the assessed value is, we're going to increase it by the constitutional limit each time until we get caught up, which they were never going to get caught up. So I'm not sure what happened last year, if you had some facility close. It's strange. You know, in some counties, I'm not sure if Oklahoma County is one of them, they're supposed to revalue everything at least once every 5 years. Some counties do 20% of the county each year. You know, so they just kind of rotate around, and maybe that's what happened, and you were in the 20% that wasn't. And then maybe this year it'll shoot up there. But it was definitely an aberration compared to everything else. I said that's the lowest growth rate in the last 27 years.
So I guess my question would be, at the lowest growth rate in the last 20 years, you use that figure to forecast, and I'm looking at the 5-year, 4.4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So during the next 6 out years, if that entire amount of bonding capacity that we could do is roughly $18 million. But accurate? For 21, 22, or up to 24, it's 12 and a half?
Yeah.
And then thereafter, every 2 years, it's
About another
5 and a half.
Yep.
So that's
On what
18.
schedule are you on? Okay.
4.4.
He
He just added a year basically,
I added a year.
or another issue.
You know, Ron, what we're trying to do here is kind of what this is. We got a new superintendent, we're trying to do a reset. Short, and long, okay?
Okay.
It's good for us to know that in the next 5 years, at the worst growth rate we've ever had, at a very modest 22 mils, that's pretty low for a school district bonding
Urban area.
around here, okay, the metro area for sure. That in those conditions, there's about $18 million
Right.
available.
Going out through, like I said, we're extending out through July 26th instead of July 24th.
So I want to get the numbers in context so that when we're looking at this, if there are directions that we take,
Right.
do we have that money to build the structure that would call for? And it appears to me by these numbers, at these calculations, we would. I think. I don't know.
So that's going to depend on the structure.
Right. No, absolutely, but we need to be able to get to where we want to go, we need to understand that we can afford to get there.
And
It makes sense.
to give you a broader perspective, you're talking about going out to 2026.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the bigger financings for like a complete school or something like that, they'll go out 14, 16 years.
Right.
So, you know, you're well within the realm of pretty much anything, you know, that you want to do.
Legitimately, we want to do.
And I'll caveat that is in addition to whatever new structure, you need to plan, you know, if you're going to need technology along the way, if you're going to need buses along the way, you need to factor that stuff in.
Right.
The way we do our financing, we don't dedicate all of your capacity to those projects. And that way, if you have an emergent situation come up, you know, the bus barn burned and your insurance has lapsed. You could do a bond issue and come back and do something for that. And if you have more growth than what we project, you can come back and recapture that growth, you know, and get your village back up. You know, so we don't want to put you in so tight of a financing that you can't do anything. You know, or that it's a stress each time we go to sell the bonds, like, is your capacity gonna be there? You know, so it's, you know, it's built in with flexibility. And then, I'll just pull up, the other thing that's part of the handout, this is what we call our election day cheat sheet. Next year's great. It's back to having our, basically our full set of elections. Even numbered years, especially a presidential election year, are tough for school districts because we lose so many election dates. And then the way they've done the school board races now, it's you don't know if you're gonna have a race in February, if you're gonna have one in April, if you're gonna have one in both. So it's hard to plan, you know, for bond issues. September and October are usually really good election dates. We don't have those this year. Theoretically, you could vote in November. I don't need to practice. And that's pretty much what it'd be. Because there's gonna be a lot of people out there voting against things, very few voting for something. So that's why I picked January as the first date, viable election date. And then I said March is the earliest we could get the money. And the filing deadline for January, which the other good thing is, since it's a non-general election year or statewide election year, it's a 60-day filing deadline. Or if you're voting with a statewide race, it's 75 days. So you have until November 12th to call for a January 12th election. And again, you know, if that's too fast,
What would be your second recommendation?
probably March. And that's just because we know there's nothing else going on in March. February, you may or may not have a primary school board election. April, you know, depending if you had a primary, if somebody got more than 50%, you don't have April. If they didn't, then you got April. It's hard to schedule around then. Filing deadline for March 2nd is December 31st. That March 2nd means probably the earliest you could get your money would be late May, early June. You know, just reconfigure some of the stuff. And part of the reason is if you notice, just look at Schedule 4.4 again. The way I've got it set up right now is, you know, bond issues are coming off the tax rolls in big chunks. So it's every couple of years. If we did it where they were coming off every year, we wouldn't be able to do as much. And you'd end up paying more fees to me and things like that. So I'm trying to space it out where you're getting as much bang for your buck as you can. But again, there are so many options on how we can structure this or whatever you want to do. But until you tell us, you know, what you really want to do, we can't even.
Right. Like a May 11th would be, you'd have to have your kind of money, your plan, generally what you wanted to do by March 11th.
Right.
And then you would probably get your money somewhere in July, August.
Which would mean it'd be a year
Another
later.
cycle.
Yeah.
So now you'd be operating on another deficit down to 9 mils.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm not trying to throw people in general under the bus, because I'm the same way. I have a short memory when it comes to taxes. I remember what I paid this year because I've complained about it. But the other, it's been 2 years since I complained about it. So it's like, you know, the farther you get from the high point, the tougher the sell is going to be. And the more, I mean, there's obviously very good reasons, you know, even before the COVID-19. But
listening to that, there's almost no way to avoid getting into the nines, right?
Yeah, you can avoid it by, probably the latest recommended date would be March 7th, which you would have to have so.
That's what I mean. I don't think they realistically.
We're into, what is it? I don't even know what month this is. August, whatever. Almost August.
It's April 750th.
That means, well, we'd be going at warp speed on this next bond issue, I think.
Right.
And I mean, by comparison, I mean, that's Up to you if you want to take that on to figure that out.
I don't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
So the first issue that I'm looking at now, we scheduled for March 21. The second one's July 22. So there's not a big gap there. If there's something of lower priority, not the big project, but just some stuff you might need, you could do basically a placeholder.
The problem is, Ron, here's the deal, we haven't gotten into this, but we all know this, we've talked about it at a previous meeting. We have to complete a few things that we didn't get to complete without here that we're required to complete.
Gotcha.
And it's not crazy amount of money, but what we think is it's infrastructure things. So we may need to tag on a piece that is sort of direct student related, where when you go to ask the community for support, sometimes it's hard to see the infrastructure benefits. Those are the needs. We have to have that.
Right.
We've been told we need that.
It's just not sexy.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're dealing with, hey, you got a tax break last year, but yes, your school millage is going to rise a little bit. We have to be honest about that.
Right.
And we want to be honest brokers with their money. And we want to say, yes, we have to do this, but because of this, we're going to be able to do this. This is a huge improvement to your child's daily experience at Oakdale.
Right.
So I don't know how much that costs. I don't think it's going to break the bank, but it's probably a couple $1 million.
I mean, even things like the Chromebooks you're talking about, for technology improvements. I mean, right now, sanitizing equipment. I mean, there's a lot of things that you could add to the bond issue because, like I said, it kind of as a stopgap measure, keep the millage from dropping again.
But this is good because now we can kind of, you have numbers, we can sort of see, it helps us kind of frame what you want to do up here.
Absolutely.
You have confidence now that there's there. Now we have to make tough calls as far as timing and the effort and planning that goes into get.
Yeah, for me, the timing.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's tough right now.
A big, getting community consensus around a big project right now, like high school is.
Well, I don't even want to take that on. I mean, that's, again, we have to do what we have to do. And then we go up here and we look at our near-term goal, which I think we need, I think, and we're going to get into that later, that we all agree that we need a comprehensive master plan. Comprehensive master plans cost dollars. I mean, not crazy dollars, but something we have to bond for. We're not pulling that out of our general fund, are we?
And then,
So I think we have things in there to do this. We just have to determine what they are, what do they look like, and what do they cost.
the April 6th, assuming, you might still have a school election, but if you voted April 6th of 2021, we could close the issue by June 30th of 21, which means it would go on tax rolls July 1st, 21.
So April 6th would be I look at February 4th. February 4th would be our last day to get it on to this FY.
Right, because that's going to be filed at the Oklahoma County Election Board on February 4th, which means we could have a, noon meeting, get the documents executed, assuming it's not the apocalyptic blizzard, probably with the heat wave, but at the time.
That's 7 months of planning. That seems more legit. General presidential election, I agree with you. In Oakdale, I'm confident in our ability as a school, our ability as a board, our ability with the folks that we know, our friends, our neighbors, and even those that we're not friends and neighbors with, that we can put a plan together, even if there is 2 people running for the school board election in April, which there may or may not be. We can't predict that. And make a viable option for them to say yes or no. And I think predominantly we get yeses.
And the reason that we try to stay away from the school board race is that sometimes people will run on that opposite side. I don't see that in Oakdale. The makeup of your community just doesn't seem like that. Obviously, you know a lot better than I do.
As long as we stay away from high school.
Yep.
That's fine.
Well, I don't
And
think,
we have enough, but we don't have to.
look, I don't think the way we have sort of, not that we've, this guide is the actual guide, but that is something that a master plan in my mind will determine. And that is to me, at least an 18-month process, at least.
Even under, as I said, even under, we had nothing to focus on with that.
Right. So I'm not, I think we just need to be clear to everybody. I mean, it's something that we may put in, we may set aside money for a master plan that will give them options for the future, but that future's 4 or 5 years down the road, you know, in 2023. Or 2024. I mean, that's just putting it there. I mean,
It's just the reality of it.
and if we don't use that money, we only use 2 million. I mean, that's 10 million plus whatever else we have. I mean, that's a big little chunk of money in 2024, 25.
You know, if you had something, like I said, again, I go back to the stopgap because it concerns me. The village just keeps dropping down. People have to come back. If you had something around $1,350,000 in needs, whether it's for technology, buses, you know, we could do that with one levy period, and it would just be on the tax rolls and fill up 1 year. You know, and that's just a way to buy some time. Which, I mean, it's still stuff you need.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like it's frivolous. It gives you time to come up with a bigger plan to present to the community. But, like I said, there are so many options right now. Time, of course, is the constraint.
You know, one item, I don't know if it's on your agenda, that might touch all the students, would be FFU, furniture, flexible.
We talked about it in-house.
And that's something that if you needed to get a ballpark idea of what that would cost or what kind of amounts you could set aside for that, we've just been through this with Putnam City Schools for their CAPS replacement. And I could get together, their classrooms are about these sizes. And I think as much as Oakdale has invested in adding classrooms and supporting your visual and fine arts programs, which are amazing for K through 8, furniture has never really been part of the equation. That has just kind of gotten taken care of on the side, and it's not been part of the architectural development. But I could very quickly get you a per classroom budget number based on what we've just done with CAPS and Putnam City. Something else that we could look at is identifying some spaces within your kind of grade level neighborhoods where your common spaces have been used more for congregational space and not for an extension of teaching space. It might be that there could be some targeted interior renovations that would let classrooms open into each other or open into breakout spaces, but as an extension of what your teachers are already doing with your kids. As you guys are working into more and more project-based and inquiry-based learning, it might be that some things could be identified, some money could be set aside that all the kids get to see. It's pretty, it's exciting, you can get good images to have for bond promotion, that when you need to set aside a lot of money for the yucky stuff, that's something that every student would see a benefit to. So that's something that wouldn't be that hard to come up with a per classroom number that you could budget for. And it wouldn't take long at all. So if you needed to do that just to keep just to get to something in January or March, that would be incredibly doable.
By the way, the
Very
CAPS
recent numbers.
Middle School is incredible. It's unbelievable. Inside, yes.
How we got together. The furniture and everything is finally started really arriving. I emailed you a link to OneDrive. I don't know if you got it, like I think I got the right address in there. I've got some photos from last week. But there's an awful lot that you could do that would be easy to sell as an extension of teaching and learning and as a real way to support. You've already got these amazing teachers who are doing some incredible things at Oakdale, but for the physical environment to be more progressive and more forward thinking, I think that the decisions for the last 10 to 12 years has been more classrooms, keep our class sizes low, but the physical spaces look the same that they did 15 and 20 years ago. There are good reasons for that, and obviously Oakdale's still doing amazing things, but that teaching spaces would have some modifications that would, I think, give you guys some really, really good selling points to support what your teachers are already doing. They're doing some amazing things.
And one thing to bring up, because of the way bonds are levied and collected, bonds that are dated July through March, if we did it, like I said, we're going to just be on the tax rolls 1 year, we can do that. Bonds that are dated April through June, the minimum they're on the tax rolls is 2 years. So that 1,350,000 number I gave you, that would have to be in March to keep your millage up, because if we did it April, May, and June, the 1,350,000 would have to be about 2.7, because it'd be spread out over 2 years. And again, it's just the way that the bonds are levied and collected. So that's a weird one to keep in the back of your mind.
That's weird.
So that means we need to aim for that March 2nd.
If you want to try to do a stopgap to keep it, yeah. Which means, what is it, November? Filing deadline for that one?
December 31.
Okay. Or wait, no, that's the election. The issue date, it has to be March.
Needs to be March.
Yeah, so the January election, which means,
November 12th.
right,
Yeah, I'm completely against
There's
that.
no way.
I just think we're trying to rush. We need to.
then it's, like I said, then
March 2nd.
the shortest stopgap is probably going to be about 2.7, and it'll be over 2 years. Which kind of goes back to, is that going to be too fast for the first one and too slow for the next one? And again, this could all change once we put evaluations out.
Right.
Yep.
Which we need to wait. Clearly we need to wait to see what this 1.8.
And when's that date again?
At the end of this month or beginning of
Like
September.
weeks, right?
Yeah, like I said, the State Board of Equalization is sending the public service figures out to the counties tomorrow. And that's what they have to wait on before they can do their valuations per county. That's the number they don't have. They have their own personal and real property. They just don't have public services at the state level. That's what they're waiting on.
I can't remember. Our next special meeting is in August. Was it? 20th. We will know by then. Oh, that's the first day of school.
Oh, wow.
You're gonna help some pre-K kids get through classes.
We can do that. So we will have that. We will know by then for sure. Probably, it's likely.
Most likely.
Yeah. So it's good.
Good, yeah.
Good time.
Yeah.
Somebody, you're smart that day. Well, Ron, I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Oh,
This helps put things in perspective.
Yeah.
For over the next couple meetings today, we're gonna kind of sort of debate all this.
Thanks, Ron. Back to our pillars guiding our master plan. We talked about COVID-19 today. We have an executive session coming up for the second pillar. We just talked about bond issue information. And then we're talking about facility review. So we have our other VP folks here. Where would you like to kind of tag off of what Ron was saying, or?
Well, we know that you wanted to, understand the infrastructure projects that need to be completed. That was in your email to us. Describe that. We brought some exhibits to visit whatever the board wants to. We have a lot of history here and we can describe the past, whether or not, just putting as we want. And I think we might be interested in seeing, just knowing that we have some conceptual plans for how this will go, and we did test fits for the new property. We have all that information. So,
Do you know which file that we would want? I don't know if we ever certain files.
well, maybe we should start with I don't think you need a history of how the campus group built out. That's not relevant, just with the forward.
Jackie's got access to that.
I've got your file open, I just don't know which
Yeah, so I know
sub-file.
which one to open, so.
Okay, the one called high school, HS.
Which document within it do you remember?
Okay. I'm gonna go look over your shoulder. We have a slew of documents here. Okay, so- Okay,
All the way to the bottom.
oh my gosh.
You're gonna crucify us again, aren't you, with that one?
That's just
Right.
some early stuff that,
Yeah.
that we worked through with the board.
Yeah.
The ultimate report in mind that looking at that all, that had the entry on the right, which ended up being over on the left. All kinds of changes. that were-
But it is good to see, I want you all to see this, that your previous boards, I mean, we're looking forward that far ahead to try to be able to, now this got put out briefly. I mean, I think the high school lot, because you have to, we don't want to scare everybody. We want the community to have a choice. I don't know what that choice is going to be. But they gave a rendering, now some of the pictures worth 1,000 words, you can kind of see what were we thinking when people say, ask Todd Corbell, why is that gray? You know, why didn't we make that green? Well, we were trying to get people in their minds that maybe that was going to be something else down the road that the community would decide at some point, based upon facts and figures.
The next page on that document. Okay, so that's basically in gray is what's been built, and what's in white was starting to move northward. And you can see that it would require a stairs be built on the front and the back. So the idea was build this first phase with a concrete second floor, which it's there, so it can go straight up, and then a two-story piece behind it. That two-story piece has not been designed, really just explored here to make sure that it could be built. And there was a program of spaces prepared with the board and the superintendent over how many classrooms by capacity. And that's what that footprint was based on. And it could go further north means the more work on the road loop will return that. That was a piece that was beyond the budget of the phase one here. The city allowed it with the gravel terminal for a fire truck, but they said, when you do the rest of it, we need the road back. And that would be an expense item. The farther north it goes, the bigger retaining walls.
And that's been a current thing with the fire department, that in the past, we've always had a loop road around our facility. And so that was them giving in for this phasing. But the next thing that they do want to see is the road connected again all the way around the building. The other thing is they were very happy when we started adding on to the building because we were sprinkling everything. And that was a big plus for Oklahoma City to have schools that were sprinkling the buildings. But we still kept growing, and so we had to have fire areas. And so there's several fire department connections on the existing building. And just on the last phase that we did, the fire department said, we would like to just have one fire department connection that has everything connected, so that they could just hook up right there and everything would be, all the water would be where it needed to be, and they could go anywhere and put out
So
fire.
those are the two infrastructure projects. The way a sprinkler system works, you have a riser room, big pipe comes in, and then spider webs out. After you, some years later, build another building, build another riser, and spider web out. And they just want the riser ones connected to each other.
And so what we've been asked to do on the next phase is to connect all of those little rooms. We have a overall site plan that shows all of the different ones that are here. There's probably 5 right now. And some of these can be reached by going outside the building and connecting to one location. There's a couple of them that can go with inside the building through the ceiling. And so we've looked at it that way, that is something that needs to be engineered and put in place before we do the next phase or while we're doing the next phase. And the road is kind of been back and forth. We've shown this plan, but we've also been asked to expand that out farther. So that's a pretty big expense. But if you want to have more room to go for a second floor, that's reasonable. But there is going to be expense involved the farther north you go, because there's going to have to be a substantial retaining wall. And there's also the issue of water that we came across on this last phase that was a pretty big issue.
Uncovered this plan basically.
Yeah, I was there for that part. Okay. So this, just again, I don't want to spend too much time on history. That's helpful. We need to get on to talk about what's in front of us. But just for the for particularly the 2 newest board members here, Aaron and myself, that rendering is not the furthest north that we've contemplated.
That's correct.
Okay.
There's another 8 classrooms per floor that can go on that, and that extends that we wrote quite a bit north.
Which is what we talked about, not stranding our precious land.
Yes.
And I think I'm borderline bedrock on not making that mistake.
Yes, it's, to think about, 6 years down the road, we're short term, 2.7 million. I don't know what that cost is gonna be, but to maximize our land space is absolutely, I think, just critical for us, no matter the cost, honestly, because we just don't have it. Or we don't buy property. I mean, that's part of Take the Next plan. Take a look at that. Where else can we get property in the Oak Corridor? There are some pieces. We have to set aside a plan for that. But I think it's something that is comprehensive that we need to talk about in that near-term planning piece. But right now, to me, we need to do a bond issue because we need some things. And we need that road done. We need that FEC loop put in. Those are things that no matter what we do, they have to go. Whether they're part of a huge project or just it, to me, that is the next thing. And then it's coming up with maybe what the tertiary, quaternary plan or project that we want to do to kind of tie it all in for this next, whatever date we decide, 2021. I mean, it's going to be an election in 21, I think, probably. But we need to have an idea, which goes back to what our initial kind of facility review coherent here.
And it does make a difference which piece you do next. The lower portion, we don't need to add the stairwells. But once we go up, we'll need to have stairwells involved, and there's just issues like that, and also how we do the furniture. We have made provisions on this existing piece to add awnings and different things in the future if we need to do that.
Now, is it accurate, just repeating what I think I heard, that the next expansion, the fire department's going to require the closure of the loop?
Correct.
Okay, so the road really is integral to step number next.
Yes.
on what we do. So might we think about the road and its construction as that part?
Absolutely, 1,000%. The road and
That's next.
To me, the road and the FTC are absolute givens for this next bond issue. 100%. I mean, I can't think of any compelling argument from anyone to say that that's what this school needs next. Because we've been told by, people that control certificates of occupancies, I think what we have to do is, one, determine what that looks like. We have to generally get an estimated cost. If we say put it on the boundary, what's it gonna cost? The retaining wall's 45 feet, what does it cost? So that we can make a determination about what we can tell Mr. Fisher based upon 1.8 growth or maybe 5.5% growth. And then I think over these next few planning sessions that we have, we've got to determine what else do we put in there to where, to me, it's got to be, it's always been a direct student focus where we're making an improvement on the existing campus. I mean, we've got some ideas we'll share. We need to ask them. I brought some ideas to show you today, just for me talking to people, so.
Well, and looping the road would, mean we'd have to move a lot of dirt, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So would we still need the retaining wall for moving all this dirt and still need to retain?
Yes, because you're gonna be digging in to the east side of the property line.
Okay.
And it's gonna come down. Now, I don't know all the elevation changes. I mean, we'd have to take a look at that, but yeah. it's
It might
part of it.
end up similar to what we had to do
That's right.
tracking. We had to go large.
Okay.
How tall is that, a 40-foot?
I don't think it's quite that high. It's,
6,
no, it's like 15.
16?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks pretty big, but it's actually.
More than 16. We're gonna go climb it up. More than our climb, we'll say.
It's gonna be around.
It's big.
It's big, yeah. And that wall, I think, these guys will tell me if I'm full of it or not. I think that's roughly $315,000, somewhere in that ballpark. Am I right on that?
That sounds realistic.
Yeah, I think that's what that costs. I mean, drainage and, I mean, the whole nine. We looked at various options, concrete. I mean, those are decisions that we're going to get to go through with you, Dr. Chris, and what functionally works, what looks the best, how much does it cost, what we're willing to promote to the community, to the taxpayer, and, you know, that's part of the planning piece to get to our election, our final deal, so we know what we need to do. So.
Okay, is there anything else?
No, I think let's keep going. Anything else?
Yeah.
We had multiple versions of this earlier that, I guess, in a sense, we've gone through those. The key in planning out that road, if it's prohibitively expensive to go all the way to the property line, then how much do you save up going back? How much does that compromise your vision for the future?
Right.
And that's going to be the discussion.
Yes.
And you guys have a lot of work ahead for the teaching and learning part. You know, what is the future edition and what are those needs? How's that going to work? The big plan was at one point, okay, we planned for 30 classrooms, whatever the number was, between 30 and 40, and then the district would build a lower elementary somewhere to start to relieve capacity and start to split it out into existing structure. That's kind of the thought of the board some years ago.
Yes, absolutely. But again, I think that's why the board has changed, the superintendent has changed. I think that's why now more than ever, it is important to take care of our short-term needs that we know of, we absolutely know. And then do this master, go through that process so that we can, hey, is this the direction of superintendent of schools now?
Something that might be helpful up here is that lower elementary floor.
Yes. I have 3 documents in there, let's pass that.
And we did just a real fast test fit of a program of spaces and would that fit on that other piece of property. The district bought that, is that correct?
Yes, this is the property that we own at the corner of Garrett and Hefner.
Yeah, it's a triangular piece, and so this was just looking at, okay, the program that was sort of hastily developed. With that square footage,
It was 3 grades, 6 rooms, 6
Early
spaces
education.
per grade. I mean, it was a good size.
through
Yeah.
We're
three.
pulling that house.
Really credits.
And this was just working with Kimberly to come up with a program spaces and seeing would it fit on a triangular piece of land and how could circulation work and you're at the intersection. So having on and off on both of the major streets, and there's a couple of, there's one other document, I think it's a little different in this. So we just did a couple of test fits to say, okay, it could be done. And it had to be further work to.
How many classrooms each?
This was to hold a pre-K through 2nd grade, I believe.
We looked at it through 3rd and through 7th.
We had 3 classrooms each.
No,
It was more than that.
no, I think it was 4 because we knew that we were gonna get to that. I never got any further than this based upon, as far as programming, actual classrooms, none of the board was involved in that other than carving that footprint out. What would work? I mean, how do we get water to it? How the septic and so those general things or general big things, as far as details inside that blue 27,000 square foot piece and 29,000. We didn't take it any further than that.
It was 6 per grade.
6 per grade.
Yeah.
And I did want to mention one thing that, this site, the original Oakdale site would really be impacted by a high school, it would be parking. We have ample parking for everything, K through 8 right now, that's not a problem, we've got more than you need. But you would have an issue of trying to find parking spaces for a high school if that ever happened.
Students.
Well, you don't really have any way of knowing if your high school would have the same number of kids in each cohort as your younger kids were. Right now, you've got kids who transfer into Edmond, there are the Edmond kids that want to transfer into Oakdale, depending on if you do this and what kind of model this becomes. It may be something that people from Johnson, Luther, and Edmond are clamoring to get their kids into starting in 9th grade. It just depends on what you do and what kind of programs you decide to have that maybe a large district just can't provide because of their concerns for parity between sites and things like that. I know that's something that Edmond struggles with when you have multiple high schools. And they can have a lot of great offerings, but they can't really have specialized offerings. And that gives you guys an opportunity to look at things completely differently. But it might be that you don't have 75 9th through 12th graders in each grade, maybe even 125.
But they can
And
control that.
you can control that. Yeah, I mean, you'll be in control of it, but it may be that you are partly Oakdale schools and partly an area magnet school. I mean, we don't know what this could turn into. So it might be that just that expected number of juniors, seniors, and half your sophomores isn't your working requirement. I mean, you don't know. Just you're years out from knowing that.
Which goes back to, I think, the third part of, at least the third part, I think it's a 4-part bond. Third part is setting aside money in that bond to do a master plan that considers questions you're hearing here, there, everywhere. And just providing options. Here's what this would look like. In this stovepipe, and this stovepipe, and this stovepipe. This is what it would cost here, A, B, and C. And then you try to just work that to a decision plan. You all are master planners, right? Okay, what for a school district our size, let's say where we would be considered, I mean, if you're all in on the high school here, we'd be maybe just a smidge smaller than maybe a Jones, maybe we'd be 2A, maybe. When we're all filled up, I mean, what's a master planning general cost to do that, to review all that for a district like this?
Well,
I mean, ballpark, I mean, I'm not holding it to anything, but we're talking significant money, right?
10 grand or 100 grand?
Yeah.
I think I know the answer.
It depends a lot on what you want us to do. We work with a lot of districts who have handled, who have split the plan into, okay, for visioning, and strategic planning, of the teaching and learning component, we're gonna get, we're gonna do that with our own experts, and we're gonna get a special person, a facilitator to look at that. And then the architects come along beside that effort, looking at how to compare that educational program with the physical, plant that you have here, and how do they match up with what needs to change to match the architecture of how you want to teach and learn in the future. So that's a fairly limited scope for us. We're looking at facilities and parking and square footage. And we do those $10,000 to $20,000. That's not a big deal. But the most robust plan that we've done was $65,000 for Stillwater schools. It was looking at a lot of campuses, and it was very, very comprehensive too. I don't think it was as touchy as yours is going to be on the academic side with the questions it's trying to do. That was just, okay, what's our growth, transportation needs, and we looked at all of that with a pretty good document, and I can share that. And that took a lot of meetings. That was, again, we weren't responsible for the whole thing. We were responsible primarily for a large component of it. And the superintendent was responsible for it. And we put it all together into the document. So, need to define the scope.
Well, so working backward from that, from the board here, thank you. By the way, anything else we need to ask specifically of architecture team? Okay, well,
Yeah, I mean, please, I mean, honest, thanks for sitting through the piece that you didn't really need to be a part of.
One thing I want to say is I really commend you for what you're doing ready to do. It's great to see. Too many times, I'm not to be disparaging anything at all, but I know a lot of the projects we've done, this is the last wing we're going to do, so don't worry about that. Yeah, you can hear that, right?
Right.
And we've been talking about high school. I'm the superintendent that I did for students, he said, not as long as I'm superintendent. So things weren't discussed and considered like they need to be now.
There was never a discussion, there was never a Board of Education discussion on that, ever, not until our last meeting.
Hope we can be part of it.
Thanks.
thank you all very, very much again.
Thanks.
Okay, board.
Thank you very much.
Again, thank you, guests. All right, that does conclude the work session, agenda item number 9. Agenda item number 10 is consideration of going into.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, please.
You want to,
Yeah.
I forgot.
Oh, yeah, your pass outs.
Yeah, my pass out. So, one of the ideas that, we talked about generally last time was, when we have to move 100 ton of dirt, which you will if we go to the boundaries of this thing. And I think these guys kind of made it clear it's a heck of an excavation project. When we talked about, do we adequately have an outdoor recreation area that is, if you go out here and take a look at that, I mean, I took some pictures and I'm like, we should be doing better than that. We're Oakdale. I just think that we can and we should. To me, I mean, I'll advocate for some manner of this for all levels of school. I mean, and not just, I think there is enough things in there where you can plan something here, that no matter what we do 5 years from now, it'll be added value and viable for any grade level. And just make it more of a park-like hub and somewhere safe, and somewhere that the community can use as well. And there's so many things that we can do, and there are so many things that schools are doing all over the world. I mean, it's incredible what they're doing. Yeah. I think we have that opportunity to consider this. So anyway, it's just, I gave you some pictures, some ideas. I did meet, when we talked about the short-term facility planning, I met with Dr. Hine, we talked about it. He's got a 3-member team. Their facility called consultant is a guy named Danny Jardine. I don't know him, but he works with, there's like 3 big, sort of like Ford, Chevy, and Chrysler, Fiat sort of school big projects, and he is in one of those 3. He's doing $1 billion project down in Florida for a school district, I think in Miami-Dade County. He's coming on board to the USDA right now this summer. So they'll come in and they'll do that short term, where they'll do your sort of, kind of what he was talking about, and he used the term 10 to 20,000. It's about what these guys charge. All right. They haven't had, if they would do this for us, this would be probably the biggest, most comprehensive short-term sort of facility plan that they would have taken on, because this is a relatively new program. So you have to consider that. But I did talk to him, and they'll give you some general ideas about what to do. And I presented it that this was a short-term, take a look, enrollment, space utilization, what we have currently, what we know we have to do now, and then offer some recommendations for some. They don't do comprehensive master planning like I think we're thinking about, or what they were talking about in Stillwater, to give us some national companies, local companies to consider doing a very comprehensive, top to bottom plan. I mean, so that's 10 to 20 grand. I mean, they have to come out and talk, and it's all about comfort level and what you think value you're going to get for your money, and do we need to do it. So that was that. I had Mike Knopf, who is the director of the Boathouse District, and I had him come out and look at this, and some of these photos are from him because he's very good in trying to come up with youth-related activities that don't require constant monitoring, but are, I mean, at the forefront, world-class things that are being done all over the world for children's kind of recreational areas. And just so I let him take a look. I mean, you can go down to his area. I mean, he's doing that all the time, and it's pretty impressive what they put together down there. So he's another subject matter expert that we have in Oakdale that, provide maybe some good counsel. So he took a look at that and gave me some feedback. So that's my idea.
Super, Todd. Thanks for leading on that for me with Dr. Hahn. That's extremely useful. Okay, well, since that item 9 was our work session, I'm not done with it. Do we have anything that you feel like, it seems like with the instruction on the bonding capacity piece clearer in my mind than it was an hour and a half ago by a long measure. Do you guys have a view now on, okay, here's what we probably need to include for sure, and the timing? I mean, it seems like a few of those things, the for sure spell out of that. I think that the consideration of this road is, just square in something we need to do one way or the other.
Yes.
If that's true, then working backward from that, we need to engage
Yes.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be nice to set a goal that we're comfortable with right now. Hey, we want to target for a resolution filing date of such and such. I mean, I don't know what you all think about, the whole millage dropping and things like that, and the rodeo, the tax deal. I mean,
A lot more clarity after we get the equalization.
At 100%. So maybe we wait until August the 20th to really.
But not long after that, right? Seems like if we,
Yeah,
once we know that data point,
we need to get real numbers for what real cost will be.
and maybe we should run that contemporaneously. So should we go ahead and set these guys off running on, get a number for that?
I think we need to know what that road's gonna cost at its most expensive, at the parameters. Can you even do what we would want to do? And what's that gonna leave the void here and keeping the road back away from the school so that you don't have to send students across it during the, during the day.
Because again, we're gonna be building that road, we're gonna be closing the road, it's the limiter to any other next steps we take.
Yes,
The
you're
cost,
gonna have to put the FDC along that road.
and the cost is gonna be what the cost is gonna be.
Yes.
So it seems like we bite the apple on that one and get them working on.
Yep.
Yeah, so that we don't have that as a limit.
Right.
Okay. No, that necessarily take board action, as much as there's just a directive to, would you, Dr. Pierce, follow back up the, and set them out running, and then we'll approve. the
Now,
action.
Well, there will be a fee for that.
Right.
Because I'm sure there will be a fee to come up with sort of an estimate of cost, which they have, I mean, Mike, you can tell us. They've done some general work on that road cost, correct?
Like an estimate,
Yeah,
they've done some.
yeah. And the water abatement, we can't forget about that. That's part of that road. That's still an issue over there. It's not 100%, but with the road, it would go away 100%.
Hopefully,
Oh, yeah,
they
right.
gotta redirect it to go somewhere.
Right. But I know they've done some preliminary cost analysis.
They have, I'd have to look in a folder, we could call and ask them, I don't have a number off the top of my head.
Okay.
But was that for going all the way to the north?
It was go as far north as possible with whatever coating had to be away from the fence.
Yep.
And around, and then to connect,
To the outer loop, wherever we wanted it to connect. I mean, we never really got into anything like changing this with them or adding that piece. It was strictly to push the road as far away as we could legally with all the easements and,
I don't know.
life safety stuff.
I don't know that they had considered as much of a water issue that we had.
Right.
They had considered some because they kind of started building the new wing, but since then, I think there's probably some additional cost that is going to be required to redirect.
Why don't we have them, or have them price getting that to us, a fully actionable plan on building the road?
Yeah.
And then set them on a course of, give us an estimate, and then we can approve the cost.
They include the fire.
Yeah.
And there may be a fee for that, but I think then it would be a vote for we have to pay for that.
Correct.
But we'll,
I can give them a green light. So
you say, hey, yeah, here's the deal, yeah.
Okay. Good. Other on work session, again, Todd, thanks for, you have the con fully on this, and that's very evident. Thank you.
Well, the evidence is not that I'm any better. The evidence is I've been around here, so I've seen sort of the momentum to where we are today. You all have got, I want you to understand, and you may understand like I understand, where we were while we were there, and just with the newness of everything, because it is new. I just think, I mean, you heard it right there. I don't think he was making a sales pitch. I think Jeff was saying, hey, you're really looking at this with a very sort of strategic, comprehensive focus going forward. And I think that's what we need.
Okay. All right, good. Anything else on work session, strategic planning? Okay. More to come. That does bring us to item 10, which is consideration of moving into an executive session. We do that in cases where we have particularly employment-related matters to discuss, which we do, both with respect to hirings, resignations, retirements, and we have some salary discussions for both staff and faculty. So do we have a motion to move into?
I move to convene into executive session.
Okay. We will now vote.
Aye.
All in favor, aye. Okay, Marlene, we will go into executive session 12:34. We will thank our guests Thank you,